Where does Hideo Kojima get his ideas? In this podcast, we take a deep dive into his brain and shed light on his creative process. Hideo Kojima presents Brain Structure.
はい、こんにちは、小島秀夫です。ポッドキャストプログラム、Hideo Kojima Presents Brain Structure.
Hello, Hideo Kojima here with the podcast program Hideo Kojima Presents Brain Structure. With me is my partner for the show.
Hello, Brains here. I look forward to recording with you again, Mr. Kojima.
はい、よろしくお願いします。
Let's get started.
The song you hear playing in the background of the Brain Structure intro was created by the Japanese artist Silent Poets. He is known around the world for his emotional dubstep music.
ありがたいですね。下屋に。
Yes, we were very fortunate to have Michiharu Shimoda create the song for us. And it's an original track. I mean, to think that Silent Poets made the music, it becomes hard to talk over it.
どうしようかな。
It's a very nice song. I'm really grateful.
What was your impression when you first heard it?
下屋っぽい。
It's a pure song, very Shimoda-esque. It almost seemed like a waste to add my voice over it, but since he created it with this purpose in mind, I'll take advantage of it.
Since we started today's episode with the subject of music, let's jump right into our main theme for today. Hideo Kojima on music. This time, we will hear all about Mr. Kojima's thoughts on music.
たっぷりってあんまりそんな時間
All of my thoughts? We don't have enough time for that.
Mr. Kojima, I've been told that there is an artist that you are a fan of lately. Which artist is that?
まあ、今っていうかずっと
Well, it's not just lately. This is an artist that I have always loved. Nick Cave, or rather, Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. I've long been a fan, so I have been listening to his stuff for quite some time.
For those of you who are hearing of Nick Cave for the first time, I will add a little explanation. Nick Cave is an Australian artist born in 1957.
はい、年上ですね。
Yes, he's older than I am.
He is not only a musician, but an author, a screenwriter, a visual artist, and an actor as well.
はい。もう小説家
Yep, I own all his works, from his books to his photo collections. I have all his CDs and records too.
So you are a huge fan?
もうフルです。大ファンなんですよ
Absolutely, a huge fan. But, I'm sorry, I must admit that I discovered him a little late. Nick Cave appeared in the movie Wings of Desire by Wim Wenders, right? At that time, he was gaining momentum in Berlin. Anyways, Nick Cave appeared in that scene, and that's where it all began for me. I wasn't there from the very beginning. You could say I was a little late to the party. But that's when I became a fan.
You discovered him in Wings of Desire and then became a fan of his music after that?
はい。まあ、あれ見たらみんなファンになる。
Anybody would become a fan after seeing him in that. I've always listened to electro pop and alternative music, especially from the UK. But Nick's music was something different, jazzy and a bit improvisational. His music and lyrics were not the kind of music I was used to listening to, and that's why I became a fan. I bought all his stuff. Once, a Japanese version I got from Mute Records came with a book Nick Cave wrote. It was a limited first edition, and it wasn't translated. It was in the original English language. So I can't read it, but I'm happy just to own it.
I see.
結構後に翻訳版出
And
ました
then eventually, a translated version was published. Around this time, I would always get my hands on the limited first editions and would buy various versions of the CDs. That's how much I like this band. One time, former Bad Seeds member Blixa, who's now with Neubauten, came to perform at the Licket Room in Shinjuku, and I went to their show. I was the only Japanese person there.
I see. So even though the live house was in Japan, you were the only Japanese person there?
うん、でもあれ、
But I'm really glad I went.
I see. Let's take this opportunity to play some music. Let me briefly explain how the music will work on this Spotify podcast. Everyone subscribed to Spotify Premium will be able to listen to the full version of the songs, while those listening for free will get a 30-second preview of each song. We will now play a song by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. Would you please introduce it for us, Mr. Kojima?
はい、まあものすごい好きな。
Of course, it's a well-known song that I really love. Well, I'm pretty sure everyone already knows this song. Without further ado, here is Into My Arms.
今 Into My Arms 聞いていただきましたけど、
We just listened to Into My Arms. It's a song that has been used in movies, and I actually thought about using it for the ending of Death Stranding. The lyrics and the vibe would have fit really well. So I had that song in mind when I made the ending. And since Norman Reedus is an acquaintance of Nick Cave, I was hoping he could introduce us. But at the time, Nick Cave was going through some family stuff, so I decided not to ask him. But I really would like to collaborate with him one day. If he's listening right now to Brain Structure, I hope you'll send me an email.
Nick, we'll be waiting for you to get in touch.
はい、
Yes.
Also, the French documentary The Velvet Queen features music composed by Nick Cave and Warren Ellis, a member of the Bad Seeds. I've heard this was a very good film.
そもそもですね、これ公開
First of all, this was released quite a while ago, but it came to Japan really late. Many people reached out to me on social media to tell me that Nick Cave and Warren Ellis were doing the music, so I was looking out for it. There's an old movie called The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, and these two also created the soundtrack for that. That's when I started collecting the soundtracks of these two, like The Road and Wind River. I also bought their new record that they released last year. It's really good. It was the best release of last year, at least for me.
で、そういうこともあってこのサントラ
So anyways, I just bought the soundtrack since at least that was released. I didn't think the movie was going to be released in Japan, and it wasn't available on any subscription service or Blu-ray, so I just had to make do with listening to the soundtrack by itself. But then, the distribution company contacted me saying that the movie was going to be released in Japan and sent me a CD, even though I already owned the CD.
みたいなんですけど、で
So that's how I ended up watching the movie.
I see. Let me introduce the movie a bit. The Velvet Queen is a French documentary that captures the lives of the wild animals living in the harsh nature of the Tibetan highlands. World-renowned wildlife photographer Vincent Munier and author and geographer Sylvain Tesson document their journey through the beautiful Tibetan Plateau Wildlife Sanctuary. It received the Best Documentary Award at the 47th César Awards. It was released in France in December 2021 and in Japan on August 27th, 2022.
これはですね、まあドキュメンタリーなんですけど、
The Velvet Queen is classified as a documentary, but it's really just a very beautiful film. I will place it in the top 3 films I've seen this year. There were a lot of wild animal documentaries in my day. Everyone visits the zoo, and I like zoos too. Oh, and everyone posts videos and pictures of their cats and dogs on YouTube and social media, right? Those are just family photos. But what I'm talking about with this movie is different. Wild animal documentaries like this really showcase how incredible these animals are. There aren't many shows that do that, and if you watch this movie, you'll understand. And at the end, they play Nick Cave's song, We Are Not Alone, and the viewers really feel included in that we. Dogs and other pets, zoo animals too, they're all part of our family along with us humans, though we're the top predator. We're all friends.
That's right.
でそうじゃなくて、
But not here. In this documentary, they go deep into the mountains, covering their scent so they can't be tracked, and try to capture footage of the wild animals there. It's really amazing. You can discover the true meaning of a documentary through this film. I want everyone to see this. Death Stranding is also based on the idea that we are not alone. Even if you think you're alone, you find other people out there, and from there, you have a connection. And in this case, the we refers to us humans, the top predator.
I see.
なんですこれを見たら、
But once you see the film, you realize this we refers not just to us, but also includes the wild animals out there. When you first look at it, you think, cool, so this is Tibet, and you don't really see anything at all except the scenery. But there are shadows on the sides of these mountains, shadows made from caves and such, and if you look closely enough, you'll see there are actually animals there. When you see their faces and your eyes meet, it's really spectacular. you really understand that we are not alone.
その感覚っていうのはなかなか
That feeling is not something you can experience very often on TV or in movies or on YouTube. I really want everyone to check this movie out. And of course, the music is wonderful too. You mentioned this a bit earlier, but the photographer and the geographer are French. The director is a French woman, and it was probably just the three of them who went on this journey. Well, the director never appears on the screen, but the fact that she's there is given away by some of the lines.
なんですけど、この
So anyway, it's the two guys on camera, and one of them is pretty philosophical, and everything he says is so deep. And just hearing the conversations between these two, it's something else. And they talk about whether they'll be able to see the elusive snow leopard. That's the main story, but if they really wanted to see one, they could visit a zoo.
Yes, they do have snow leopards there.
なんで日本でもいっぱいいますから
Yes, there are quite a few in Japan too. If you do a bit of research, you could probably go visit one. But what they're trying to do is find a wild snow leopard. That's the whole point. If you go see this movie, you start thinking about the we in We Are Not Alone. Now there are wars and poverty and crime and the COVID pandemic too. But if you start thinking about the we part on a more macro scale, your outlook will really change. And then that wonderful song plays and you lose your words. Like if the people taking the footage heard the song playing at the moment, they would weep. When Nick Cave's song starts to play, you hear the lyrics for We Are Not Alone, and they are just perfect. They align perfectly with what these two guys were talking about.
結局、
When I look at the vast lands of Tibet, it doesn't seem that different from Death Stranding. The scenery is quite similar, and when you're surrounded by nature on such large scale, you realize just how tiny humans are in contrast. And these two guys go searching for these animals, and they realize that these animals have been watching them too, observing them. And that's the essence of We Are Not Alone. The relationship between those who go to observe and those being observed. In the end, Nick Cave really encapsulates that feeling with the lyrics. I cried there at the end.
The animals were watching too?
動物が見てるこっち
The animals were watching in their direction. So it wasn't just the two of them going to find these creatures, but the creatures were also watching them the whole time. And it's a different experience than human civilization, in that they are meeting on the same earth. They're out there living, and we're here living. The cats and dogs that become our families. They're no different than humans. But these creatures in the documentary are of different dimension. And to witness that is the essence of We Are Not Alone.
I see. And because of that, there are snow leopards in Tibet. Is that what you are trying to say?
そうなんですよ。動物園
Exactly. Of course. It's important to see snow leopards at the zoo too, but these two visited the wild Tibet with no assurance of actually being able to find them. They set up all their camera equipment, but it's very hard to come across them. But then, just for a second, the moment is there, and it's marvelous. The two of them start weeping, but then it's so cold that their tear begins to freeze.
ほんならもう寒いから凍って
Their eyelashes and tears are frozen. But anyways, you can really empathize with them. We, the viewers, obviously didn't go to Tibet and experience the same cold, but you can understand their feelings through watching the film. It's a very crucial film, especially in our current society. You don't see many movies like that. I think a lot of people might lose interest when they hear it's a wildlife documentary. I'm sure they go see movies where the main character's a cute dog and saves the day or something. The two guys only look from a distance because they can't get too close. They have footage that's out of focus or night vision too, but yeah, I want everyone to see this. I'm sure these two's family life isn't so great though.
なんで言えば
Like, why are you neglecting your family? I gotta go find snow leopards. They also go knowing that they could possibly die. They don't know when they'll be back and they have no phone service out there. They're kind of like astronauts. They won't come back until they have gotten what they came for.
So you feel really sympathetic towards them.
二人の行動っていうのは
Yeah, and watching the two of them, There were a number of times I was like, oh, I get it. I mean, they're traveling to get footage of animals, but ultimately their goal is the same as mine. They want to give it all they've got, and there is a return for the effort they put in, and that is amazement. I really want other creators to watch this movie. But then you see the snow leopard, and it isn't as masculine and handsome as I had expected.
あれみたいな。
So it's less about what you see and more about the process and the actions taken to search for these animals.
まあどっかにおるんでしょうけど。
Yeah, I mean, the snow leopards are always out there somewhere, but you wouldn't usually get the chance to see them. But just because we don't see them doesn't mean they don't exist. They're out there because we are not alone. And their spirit of curiosity, the two guys go through all that, and it's not like they're trying to catch the creature. They just watch from afar and are moved to tears. You start to cry just watching those two middle-aged guys. And that's where the excellent music of Nick Cave and Warren Ellis comes into play. Maybe this is the #1 film of this year. And they made a Japanese version of the soundtrack based on the imported soundtrack. It's a CD, so people should definitely check it out.
Both the soundtrack and the movie.
これどうなんですかね。
It really gets you thinking. The two of them head off into the mountains and pitch tents out in the cold. And then suddenly these children appear out of nowhere. These little kids are out there playing like it's normal. They're like, hi. And it turns out they're kids from families living in the Tibetan mountains. And we get to see their home. When you see that, you realize that people can live out there, even in that harsh wilderness.
Despite it being an incredibly harsh and unusual environment for those two men.
ずっと望遠鏡見てるんですよ。
Yeah, the two guys are always looking through the telescopes, and these kids find them, and they come over. They seem to already know each other, but they start playing together and visit the kids' home. And really, the guys from the big cities are the ones that look really unusual and out of place there. And you realize it's not just snow leopards out there. There are kids living there too.
Have those children seen the snow leopards?
見てると思うんですよ。雪を
I think so. They're like, you think the snow leopard's over there? But the kids are too busy playing with the guy's cell phone since it's such a rarity out there. But you see that, and somehow it all seems quite idyllic. And then the guys start bad-mouthing Paris. Those two live in Paris, and they start talking about how sad it is that parks have disappeared, and there's a lot of disrespect towards nature. But in Tibet, this natural environment is normal, and there are actually people living there. They're living with nature. They showcase this in a really smart way too. It's not just about let's protect the environment, but they also show that there is a family that coexists with nature.
I see.
もうパッと見ほとんど
At first glance, it doesn't feel like there are any animals out there. But if you look closely, you start to see them. And then as the movie progresses, you realize there are people out there too. So we are not alone. The only people who don't understand are the city people.
For people in the cities, all they know is city people. However, when they go out into the wilderness and nature, they realize that it's not just people out there. Nick Cave, we would really love to have you join us here.
ね。ニック系どう
Yes, I would love Nick Cave and Warren Ellis to make the soundtrack for a game. Are you guys listening? Over?
Let's try to get this message to them. And with that, we are just about at time. We certainly heard a lot about music and films today. Now, let's move on to our next segment.
Hideo Kojima presents Brain Stretcher.
はい、ここからはゲームジャーナリスト
It's time for a segment featuring game journalist and TV presenter Jeff Keighley in his one-man show, TGA, The Jeff's Answer. What news will he bring us today? Let's hand it over to Jeff.
TGA, The Jeff's Answer.
Hi everyone, it's Jeff Keighley with another episode of TGA, the Jeff's Answer. And this time I thought I'd answer a frequent question that I get, which is, how do you put together the world premiere announcements for the Game Awards? The Game Awards over the past decade has become the home to many amazing new game announcements. We even announced the new Xbox Series X console in 2019. So a popular question is, well, how do these announcements come about? It's really different for each game, but I will say some studios come and reach out to us and pitch us on their games. We can't say yes to everything, and it's hard for me sometimes to make selections of which games we show. And there are other games, some of the bigger games, where we actually go out and I will go visit a developer, or I will fly and see their game, and I will try to convince them that the Game Awards is the right place for them to announce their game. We are always so deeply humbled and honored when these game developers decide to entrust us with their announcement. Oftentimes studios work for years and years to create their games, so when they choose the Game Awards as a platform to make the announcement, we want to do everything we can to make them feel like it was the right place to debut their game. We also, sometimes have to think about the mix of games. We want to make sure that there are not too many science fiction games or too many first-person games, so we have to think about the type of game and the genre and the tone of it. And also, we need to think about what we're going to show, which is in-engine games versus gameplay versus sort of computer-generated pre-rendered cinematics. All those things factor into what becomes the Game Awards every year. But of course, we're only as good as the games that are being made. And one of the things that keeps me up at night is worrying that we're not going to have enough to share with the fans. And since we don't make the games, we're really fully reliant on the game developers to hopefully have good announcements that are ready for us. The past few years with COVID and the pandemic has really delayed development of many games, so it's been a challenging few years, but I think this year we're going to have some really great things to share with fans, even though the expectations are through the roof. So there are lots of rumors, lots of speculation about things that might or might not be at the Game Awards, and that's part of the fun of the show. But I am so honored that we get to make this show every year, and it has become the home to some really exciting new game announcements. So we're working very hard on the Game Awards. You're going to see lots of new games announced this year. You're going to see lots of updates on games that have been announced that people want to see more footage and details on. It's going to be a very special night. So that's what I'm working on right now, behind the scenes of the Game Awards. Thanks for listening to this episode of TGA.
はい、早くもエンディングのお時間です。
There we have it. It's time to wrap up.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kojima. It was a pleasure to hear you speak so passionately about Nick Cave and Warren Ellis's work.
はい。では最後にですね。
We will end today with the soundtrack from The Velvet Queen, the song We Are Not Alone. It plays during a very emotional ending scene. The first part is primarily instrumental with ambient sounds, but in the second half, Nick Cave's vocals kick in. The song is 9 minutes and 40 seconds long, but to end the show, we'd like to play the song for you. See you again on next week's episode of Hideo Kojima Presents Brain Structure.
さようなら。
Wow! Nick Cave and Warren Ellis, we are not alone. I was moved for the whole 9 minutes and 40 seconds. On the next episode, Hideo Kojima himself will dive deep into Death Stranding, which has celebrated 3 years since its release. So don't miss it.
Where does Hideo Kojima get his ideas? In this podcast, we take a deep dive into his brain and shed light on his creative process. Hideo Kojima presents Brain Structure.
こんにちは、小島秀夫です、ポッドキャストプログラムHideo Kojima Presents、ブレインストラクチャー
Hello, Hideo Kojima here with the podcast program Hideo Kojima Presents Brain Structure. And here's my partner for today.
Hello, everyone. It's Jeff Keighley from the Game Awards and TGA, the Jeff's Answer. Hello, Mr. Kojima. It's great to talk with you. Yes, we were just wrapping up the Game Awards here in Los Angeles when this is airing, so hopefully many people have seen TGA. We worked all year on it, and of course, it was such an honor to have you with me in Los Angeles, but we're taping this before the TGA, even though there was the big announcement at TGA that we'll talk about. But today, we're going to talk about Death Stranding, which is, of course, the start of Kojima Productions and the first ever title that you released. And it's a game that was very special and close to my heart that, we were able to work with you on it for many times. I remember at E3, you were with us when you teased the letters DS on stage with me on the YouTube show, and then you announced at the PlayStation press conference. And over the years, we had many great opportunities to work with you on trailers for the first Death Stranding. I think we did 2 of them at Game Awards, and we even worked together on the intro movie for Kojima Productions that we did at Comic-Con one year. So Death Stranding, we just wanted to talk a little bit more about that game and what it's meant to me and to you and to all the players around the world. And of course, we're all very excited that you're stepping back into that world. But Hideo, maybe let's rewind back to the start of Death Stranding. And I know when you founded Kojima Productions, you really, you were in a naked place, for lack of a better term, and that you were starting anew and you had to create something brand new from scratch. You had to find the game engine, which you did with the Decima engine from Guerrilla. But you wanted to create, I know, a story that was entirely new. What was the original inspiration for Death Stranding?
Well, I went independent on December 16th, 2015. I didn't have a studio. The only things I had were 4 staff members, my computer, and my iPhone. And from there, I had to create a new game. But what I was hearing from friends and from users around the world was that they were expecting a AAA title as usual, but one with a completely new gameplay, look, and world settings. They said it had to be a Hideo Kojima game, meaning it had to have a theme, a message, and a story. I had a few ideas in mind for what I wanted to make, and Death Stranding happened to be the one that best suited our style and one we felt we could work our hardest on. I knew I had to make an open world game, so I kept that in mind as I searched for the right engine for the job. That's when I found Guerrilla's Decima engine, and they were kind enough to me to use it. And though we are in the middle of a pandemic now, at the time I never dreamed that something like this would happen. But even back then, there was isolation and fragmentations all over the world. So I wanted to make that the theme. And while games these days are all about battling, I wanted to create a game that connected people. I often use the analogy of a stick and a rope. There are stick games where people fight, but I wanted mine to encompass the concept of a rope used to connect and bring people together. So that was the start.
Yeah, the concept, as you said, of Sam being a porter and moving through the environment. A lot of people, as you said, were wondering what the gameplay was that you wanted to create with Death Stranding. When you look back on the conception of the game and the final product that you created, do you think you achieved your vision of what you set out to do with Death Stranding?
Yeah, I would say so. I think theme-wise and gameplay-wise, we created what we had in mind. Especially the social strand system, the SSS. I was a little worried at first regarding the gameplay concept of being loosely connected with other people on the internet, but I think it worked out well in the end. The look of the game or the setting is all pretty much the same right now. World War I, World War II, or futuristic sci-fi, steampunk, and fantasy are all quite common. I wanted to provide a different look to it, and so I used Iceland as one of the concepts in order to incorporate a bit of surrealism to the world. I think this ended up pretty close to what I had imagined at the start, too.
You talked about Iceland, and we should maybe take a minute to talk about Low Roar and Ryan and the song I'll Keep Coming, because that I know was a big inspiration for you. And I remember you were in Iceland, actually, and found that album. Of course, we're all very sad a few months ago when we lost Ryan at such a young age of just 40. But could you maybe tell us a bit about that song and Ryan and the band and how that inspired Death Stranding?
2016年の6月に最初 E3 で
So I released the first teaser in June of 2016 at E3. I still didn't have a studio then. I was in a temporary office space with very few staff, and that's where we scanned Norman. As far as digital contents go, we basically only had a naked Norman, a naked Lou, a beach, and a whale. And well, that reflected the state that Kojima Productions was in. We were naked. We had no house, no rooms, we didn't even have a sound team put together. And just as I was racking my brain for what I should do, the song I'll Keep Coming by Low Roar popped into my head. I bought their CD at a CD shop in Iceland when I visited there a while back. Their album was playing in the shop and I really liked it. And I'll Keep Coming was in that album. I thought that the concept of the teaser and the lyrics in I'll Keep Coming matched perfectly as my first teaser post-independence. And when I put it all together, it was as if I had intentionally created for this song. The visuals looked like they had been made in sync with the sound. It really was perfect, and that's how we got started.
Low Roar のアルバムはその時2枚目
Low Roar had released their second album at the time. I had obviously listened to the first album and was good friends with Ryan. I built up the world of Death Stranding in parallel with Ryan's music, and I talked to him about how I wanted to use his music in the game too, not just the teaser. He told me he was working on his third album, and he shared that with me before it was completed. While I went through the process of picking out songs I wanted in the game, they released that third album. And then, when their fourth album was nearly ready, Ryan sent me more songs to choose from that album. In the end, the game was completed just before their fourth album was released. So we worked on it together for a long time. I hadn't been in touch with him lately due to the pandemic. We always gave each other likes on Instagram. And in making DS2, I knew Ryan's songs were essential, so I was going to call him up soon. And that's when the tragic news came in of his passing. I'm completely shocked.
Yeah, no, very, very, very sad, but I'm glad his music will live on for all of us. And of course, I know DS was very important to him, and we were honored. We had him at, I think it was E3 one year. He performed, and he came to the E3 Coliseum one year and performed for all of us. I'll Keep Coming, which was very special. And yeah, a very beautiful band and a beautiful song. One other thing I wanted to talk about was actually, I remember that year at E3, I remember you ran into Troy Baker backstage and you said to him, "Oh, I might have something for you." And that's when I think I found that he was probably going to be in DS and obviously went on to go play Higgs. But I wanted to ask you about the cast, because you assembled such an eclectic, amazing cast, from Lindsay Wagner to Lea Seydoux to Norman Reedus to Guillermo to Nicholas to Troy to Tommy. I mean, there's so many amazing actors in this game. Tell us a bit about the casting process for Death Stranding. I know it started with Norman, but how quickly did you come up with all the other characters?
その独立した時に何もなかった
So yeah, after going independent, I had nothing. All I had were connections with people, so I followed those connections to make the game. It was the same with casting. I had worked with Norman Reedus during PT. Nicholas Refn and Guillermo del Toro I had relations with prior, and Troy Baker too, who I worked with for Metal Gear Solid 5. I had all these connections. But from the beginning, even during the scenario and concept building stage, I had these castings in mind, like Mads Mikkelsen for Cliff, Lea Seydoux for Fragile, and Lindsay Wagner for Amelie. And so the final cast members were not far off from my original idea. With Matt's, the very first time I met Nicholas, he gave me Matt's address. I think I've said many times on many occasions, but I contacted Matt's and planned to give him a presentation. I visited Nicholas in Denmark to discuss this with him, but at the time, he was doing Neon Demon and was working with Keanu Reeves. So Nicholas kept telling me he thought Keanu was better for the role. And we were at this restaurant in Denmark, and the owner there was like, "Yeah, I see Mads like every day on TV." So people told me to go with Keanu, but I was always for Mads. I made that character for Mads. And we did a video call the first time around, but then later met up at Comic-Con and pitched the idea to him there.
で一番キャスティングで思い出深いのはリンゼさんなんです。
The most memorable casting for me is Lindsay. She was my number one idol growing up. Whenever I work on a project, I take it on as if it's going to be my last. And so, just in case Death Stranding became my last work, I wanted Lindsay to be a part of it. And well, she agreed to meet with me, but she didn't think kindly of mainstream video games that were all about shooting and fighting with sticks. So, her participation was uncertain. Kyle Cooper let us use his studio space to meet with Lindsay. There, we talked about the concept of the rope and how the other games may be sticks, but mine was a rope. We talked for about 3 hours, and Lindsay really understood me and got on board about joining the cast. I was really happy. I was worried she would decline. I don't know what I would have done in that case.
Was there anyone that you wanted to cast in Death Stranding that you didn't get or said no to you?
ないです、ないです。
No, no one.
That's lucky. That's good to hear.
ちょっと幸か不幸かですね。
For better or worse, I had some sort of connection or a foot in the door with many of these people, regardless of whether or not they were aware of it. Their friends may be my fans, or like in Matt's case, his son was a fan of mine. So I was pretty lucky. And movies are different from games in that movie shoots take 3 or 4 months to film in a closed set, maybe 6 months to a year for big movies. But for games, scenes are shot as the game itself is being made, so it takes a long time. The actors have other movies they work on during this time, and we have to schedule shoots in between their other priorities. Not only that, but the story also changes frequently. We shoot things before the script is finalized. It's not very common for actors to agree to such a project, but everyone understood and put their trust in me. I'm really grateful that they all accepted it.
You mentioned you were rewriting or changing the game. I'm curious, are there like deleted scenes from the game, or what was the biggest change that you made to the story that fans might be interested to hear about?
いや、そんな大きな変化はないですね、エンディング。
No, not really. I didn't make any big changes per se, like cutting the ending or something like that. I did change the details on the characters though. I would spend time with them at performance captures or at dinners, and I really got to see their personalities, like their facial expressions and body movements. And I would add in those details to their characters. For instance, real-life Matt smokes, but Cliff's character at that time wasn't a smoker. But after meeting Matt in person, we went through the process of solidifying his character together.
When you think of the game, how much of it did you rewrite? You said you did many different scenes. Like, was it 20% you redid, or what is the process on Death Stranding? Was it more or less than a regular game?
これはもうデスストだけじゃなくて僕の
This
ゲーム
isn't the case for just Death Stranding. I do this with all of my games, but I write the concept and game design and scenario myself. I direct the performances and create the character and world settings as well, so I try to make improvements all the time. The settings for the characters and the world may be vague at first, but once the cast is set, we can make detailed changes here and there. Even when the costumes and accessories are already decided, detail is the most important thing, so we add in small stuff as we shoot. And when we add stuff in, that may affect the world setting or the story, so we make corrections or supplements to reflect those changes. When the story changes, we need to adjust the game too. This process would be impossible if we were to outsource the scenario writing, which is why we do it all in-house.
ダイハードマンとかしんちゃんの設定で
For example, Die Hardman was just a normal guy in Yoji's first draft. His clothes were different too. Once we created a model with Tommy, we added the mask and changed every detail on his costume. Higgs too. His face was just Troy's face at first, but I wanted to make it kind of Egyptian, so we added in those writings on his forehead. If I raise the bar on one character though, the other ones lose to it, so then I touch up on the details of those other characters. I try to create a nice balance in the end. Another example would be Fragile. Her leather jacket with the spikes that come out, I added those spikes later as a metaphor for her character to stand out more. It wasn't just for Death Stranding. I did this with Metal Gear 2. I do this sort of thing every day, so the staff hate me for it.
Yes, but that's why we love you. The thing I wanted to ask you about was on DS. It was a long, hard project for you being independent. What was the the darkest time for you in the development of the game? Was it at the beginning or at the end, or did you have any sort of downtime when you were really feeling like you were worried how the game was turning out, or when you were concerned? Did that ever happen during the development?
そんなになかったんですね。
No, I don't think I was ever that worried. It's not like I had 100 or 150 employees to start, so we gradually built up the studio, and we never had any loss or major confusion. You know, we were trying to create something new, and that's usually a very difficult thing to do. But we made several teasers leading up to it, and during that time, I was able to share my ideas and get consensus from my staff, so it wasn't that hard. There was one incident that was really tough, the 2016 SAG strike. I thought it would end in 2 or 3 months, but it went on for a year. And during that period, we couldn't negotiate with actors about shooting or anything of the sort. Other large studios moved on to hire non-SAG actors. But for us, we had already announced Norman and Mats to the public and weren't about to change that. So that year was hard. I didn't know what was going to happen.
あとはやっぱり新しいスタジオだったので、
And also, I had to handle new staff members since it was a brand new studio. There were veteran staff like Yoji too, but I had to teach the new people my way of making things, my culture, basically. Many people didn't understand, of course, so taking the time to do that was a bit difficult. I needed to be hands-on most of the time, but that's about it, I think, as far as difficult times go.
You know, the game has been out now for, I guess, it's been 3 years, a little more than 3 years since the release of it, which is incredible. And, you know, the last time we saw you before TGA this year in person was at TGA 2019 when you won the award for Best Game Direction. And Churches performed and opened the show, and Norman was there. That was a very special night. When you reflect back on the first Death Stranding, were you happy with the response from the critics and the fans? Do you think people understood your intention? Because you were doing something that was different than, as you said, the traditional, stick game that's all about just action and combat. Do you think the audience and the media really understood what you were trying to achieve?
そうですね、メディア
Yeah, I think there are people among the media and the users who understood it. I experienced the same thing every time, and it was the same with Metal Gear and Boktai too. But at the very beginning, there are both positive and negative reviews. Whenever you make something brand new, people give their pros and cons. And within the 3 years since the release of Death Stranding, the pandemic happened, which I think led to a change in the reception of the game. The game is on platforms like PlayStation Plus and has reached a wider audience, and even those who are not hardcore gamers have come to enjoy playing Death Stranding. I think it takes 3 to 5 years for a game to receive proper evaluation. For Metal Gear, it wasn't until after 1, 2, and 3 that it gained acceptance and people finally started to understand. So in that same sense, I think Death Stranding will begin to be understood little by little.
Yeah, I agree with you, because I think over time, everyone's realized, it's a game that has to sort of, you have to sit with it for a little bit, and you have to sort of play it in a less deliberate way. You can't race through it. You really have to enjoy the experience. So I think as people have been able to, marinate and sort of experience it over time, people have come to see sort of the vision of what you were trying to do. And one of the reasons I was very excited you won the Best Game Direction Award was that you did try something innovative and different with the approach to the game. And that's often something that we should reward, is that games that are different and not just predictable of the same gameplay and the same experience. That's why I think we're all very excited to think about what you're likely doing with DS2, although I know we can't get into any more details than what we saw in the teaser. I can't wait to see where you're going to take the gameplay for DS2.
まあ、DS2 はですね、実は DS1 を
Well, I was already thinking about DS2 while I was making DS1. Whenever you're creating a new game or a new IP, it's difficult to establish a game system after just the first game. This was the same for Metal Gear and Stealth, so I've learned from past experience. So, for the first Death Stranding, I was already envisioning a sequel as I was making the first one. It was already in my mind. I had all the details worked out too. But then, 3 months after DS1 release, COVID happened, and it's still happening today. There was a lot that I thought about during the pandemic and the way the world was headed. My previous screenplay did not make sense anymore. So I rewrote all of it.
あらゆるエンタメに
The ideas you may have had pre-COVID are more than likely no longer applicable post-COVID given what the users, the audience, have gone through. I think the same can be said for every type of entertainment, and I think creators of all media think this way. And so DS2 is the result of restarting from zero. At the end of the teaser, you'll see the line, "Should we have connected?" That is the theme this time around. The last game was a rope game where you connected the divided, isolated people. Connecting was righteous. Then the pandemic occurred. So now the question is, what happens from here? And DS2 is all about that.
I can't wait to learn more. And yeah, that phrase, "should we have connected?" It's almost like that sense of regret of sort of you should have done something before that you haven't, and now you realize that you didn't have the opportunity. So yeah, I'm very excited to see where your mind is going to take us for DS2, and it's been great to talk with you today. And of course, all the fans will be talking for many months about DS2, and I know in the coming weeks we're gonna have some other special episodes of the Brain Structure with some special guests to talk more about DS2.
そうですね。ちょっと今は、ティーザーで
Yes, for now I want people to discuss the teaser. Have fun with it as you think about what may or may not happen. Use games as topic of conversation. Use it as an ingredient to create communication.
But we have many questions, and I'm sure the speculation on Reddit and online is going lots of places, and we look forward to learning more about it. Well, this has been a very special episode of Brain Structure. That's it for today's episode, but as I mentioned, Hideo and I will be back with some special guests in the coming weeks related to DS2, and that's all I'll say for now. Brain Structure's mailbox is still open, so please continue sending us any messages or questions you have for Hideo, your thoughts on the podcast, and guests or topics you would like us to cover on the show. The link to the message form can be found in the episode description.
ということで、来週のHideo
We'll see you again on next week's episode of Hideo Kojima Presents Brain Structure.
さようなら。
Hideo Kojima presents Brain Structure is a production by Spotify Studios in association with Kojima Productions and Fam Inc. TGA, the Jeff Sanser MC, Jeff Keighley. Narrator, Owen Maki. Music, Silent Poets. Visual design, Mechikuro. Producer, Hiro Furuki. Director, Kohei Takizawa. Executive producer at Spotify, Asami Sekine. Special thanks to Kojima Productions, Ayako Terashima, Masafumi Chiba, Miki Suga, and Aki Saito. Hosted by Hideo Kojima.
Wow, that was a lot of behind-the-scenes scoops on Death Stranding. And this being the episode right after the announcement of DS2, I was like, what? Really? The whole time? I gotta play the game again right now. On the next episode, we're going to continue hyping up DS with special guest, the one and only Norman Reedus, who will be returning to the world of Death Stranding as Sam Porter Bridges. Tune in to hear their deep dive into Death Stranding. You don't want to miss it.
Where does Hideo Kojima get his ideas? In this podcast, we take a deep dive into his brain and shed light on his creative process. Hideo Kojima presents Brain Structure.
はい、こんにちは、小島秀夫です。ポッドキャストプログラム、Hideo Kojima Presents、ブレインストラクチャー。
Hello, Hideo Kojima here with the podcast program Hideo Kojima Presents Brain Structure. Today, we have a special guest joining us from overseas. So my partner for today will be this guy in Los Angeles.
Thank you, Mr. Kojima, and hello, everyone. I'm Jeff Keighley, producer of the Game Awards and TGA, the Jeff's Answer. Mr. Kojima, as always, thank you for having me on Brain Structure. I've been enjoying all the shows we've been doing together, and I'm very much looking forward to emceeing with you today because our guest is perhaps someone whose listeners have been waiting for ever since this podcast launched. Of course, the actor behind Sam Bridges in Death Stranding, Norman Reedus, is here. Let's jump in and hear what Hideo and Norman have to say.
ノーマンよろしくお願いします。
Thank you, Norman, for being on the show.
It's my pleasure. What an honor. Thank you for having me.
いや、こちらこそ。
No, the pleasure is all ours. Without you, I wouldn't be here, and Kojima Productions wouldn't be here. It's all thanks to you, Norman.
I love you.
I was thinking back to the DS2 trailer teaser that we just aired, but thinking back to the first DS teaser that you did at E3 with Norman on the beach, and that was such a profound moment. But Norman, that wasn't the first thing, because you guys had worked together previously on the PT project, and you had a couple things that you were trying to do together. How did you guys first met? Was it through Guillermo?
My first introduction was through Guillermo. He called me and he said, there's somebody that's going to meet you. His name's Hideo. Just say yes. And I said, what do you mean? And he goes, don't be an asshole. Just say yes. And I met him in San Diego.
Yeah.
And he came down there and showed me some of the things he was working on. And we went back into the back of a restaurant. And I sat there with an iPad and watched some things he was working on. And I said yes right away.
Yeah, I remember that Comic-Con, because I remember Hideo had his phone and he passed it over to me and had a photo on it. And I was like, I'm about to meet with this guy. And it's like, oh, wow, I'm going to meet with Norman.
最初2010?
I think it was 2011. I was talking with Guillermo about PT, and he contacted Norman. So then we went to Comic-Con in San Diego and met Norman there for the first time. And at the end of that same year, Norman came to Japan, so we scanned him and we made the PT trailer. It was unfortunate that PT never saw the light of day. Soon after, in December of 2015, I went independent. I didn't have anything, And in January of 2016, I traveled to studios all over the world in search of an engine. That's when I visited Sony's VASG studio, where we do scans and performance captures. And I thought, oh, I should use this place. Then, in February 2016, I met Norman in Los Angeles and pitched him my ideas verbally, without papers or anything to show him. He agreed right away, which is honestly unthinkable under normal circumstances. And in the following month, we took scans and performance captures of that scene in the teaser. Looking back, what we were doing was crazy. I really owe it to Norman for saying yes. We were able to make Death Stranding thanks to Norman.
It's when Guillermo called me, he said, just be yes. And I just say yes. There's certain people that I've met along the way that are just say yes to people. And when he told me this about you, I instantly knew why. I was like, he's a next level thinker who's just a total badass, and I would follow him into the abyss. And when I met you, I knew that's who you were, and you've been like that ever since we've ever hung out. So I'm glad I said yes.
What was it about? Do you remember that when he first pitched you DS, he said he didn't even really have the full concept for the game yet, but what struck you about Hideo? I mean, Guillermo already had told you, hey, you got to say yes to this guy. But when you finally met with him, what struck you about Hideo? You've worked with a lot of, interesting creative people in your career. What's set him apart?
Yeah, it's funny because, I've done movies with Guillermo, and Guillermo he's the type of guy that, like, he'll sit behind the monitor during a fight scene and he'll be like, good, punch the screen. And his level of enthusiasm and fearlessness is completely, it just takes you over. It's just infectious. And Hideo has that same sort of thing. There's very few people you meet, along the way that you believe them wholeheartedly. And, you know, he's describing me the concept behind Death Stranding. And I'm sitting here just scratching my head going, wait, what? What are you talking about? What? You know, and it's not one of those conversations that he's going to, you know, you're going to hear a pitch for and totally understand it. And so the point of me asking a million questions of it's not going to make sense anyway, not to me anyway. So you follow Hideo's enthusiasm, and his creativity is just endless, and you know that. So there is a little piece of me that felt like I was just covering my eyes and jumping on a roller coaster and saying, "Drive, Hideo, drive!" You know. So, but you trust it the entire time. You know, he's just got that thing. You know.
Did you know you were going to be naked on the beach in the first teaser?
It didn't matter. He could have me naked on a beach having sex with a whale. I'd have said yes. You know. So.
That was in the early days of our studio when we only had a temporary office and hardly any equipment. I was basically naked. And then Norman appears, also naked. The only models I had were of a beach, naked Norman, a baby, and a whale. That teaser was, in a way, a declaration of my new start. It really was a reflection of my situation at the time. And well, the movie stars I looked up to as a kid were Steve McQueen and Charles Bronson, and they were the type of people who could become heroes just by standing there. They don't even have to say anything. There are very few actors like that nowadays, but I see that potential in Norman, which is why I didn't give him any lines. I challenged myself to create a teaser using only Norman's standing figure and facial expressions. I was able to take on that challenge and was only able to succeed thanks to Norman.
Thank you.
You know, Sam as a character, I know you said like you really, you know, wrote the character based on Norman, and it was sort of, you know, very key that Norman said yes. And when he said yes, I mean, a lot of Norman is in Sam, right? So you must have, did you talk to Norman a lot to kind of figure out who Sam was as a character, or how did you develop the Sam character with Norman?
Yeah, well, you know, I would of course meet with him and go out to dinner and whatnot. I think most people don't know the regular Norman. In other words, they only know him through his acting. And of course, I want to use that side of him too, but there's a charm to regular Norman, like his playful and cute personality. So, I wanted to incorporate these elements into the game. That's where the private room scene comes into play. Inside that room, it's not really Sam, it's basically Norman. I was able to implement both sides of Norman in a way that was only made possible because it's a game. I don't think this could have been done in a movie.
Yeah, I remember being in that, shooting some of those things. And I'd be waiting and I'd go, you know, just thinking about whatever. And he would go, "Do that again." And I'm like, "Well, what did I do?" You know, he yawned and kind of scratched your neck. And I was like, "I did?" You know, and we kept doing more and more of it. And then I started to understand what he was doing with it. And it made sense. You know, it made the, I think it made the, you know, the person playing the game feel more connected to the character because there were real person things happening, you know. Made total sense to me. Yeah, you did.
And it's such a game about, you know, connection, right? So that was sort of, you know, there's always a deeper meaning to all of Hideo's games. When you were shooting it, Norman, and kind of going through the, you know, the script and the performance capture, did you fully understand what the game was about, or when Hideo talked to you about the meaning of it? Because, you know, it's a complicated story, right, with many characters, but it has a very sort of simple premise about that idea of, you know, connection.
I understood the simple premise. There were certain elements I didn't understand, and I would just kind of keep my mouth shut, and then they would slowly reveal some of themselves to them as we were going through storyboards and stuff. It's, you know, it's a lot to understand in a mocap session or 20, because there's a lot going on, and it was really my first experience ever doing mocap. So I was just learning how to do mocap, and then you can't help but play with your mocap and be like, wow, I can do all these things, and it's a whole new world for me. So to understand 100% of the game right then there on the spot, no, it's impossible. I'm not that smart. I'm just following his lead because I know he is that smart.
Norman says it was his first time doing performance capture, but on set, he took the lead. Leia, who plays Fragile, was also feeling quite nervous, but Norman was always supporting her. He really helped to create a great environment on set, and I'm really thankful.
It's very fun. It was very fun to see in real time happening. You can't help but be in a good mood, because it's just so otherworldly, the whole thing. It's funny because we were doing the first one, and I was explaining to somebody, this mocap thing that I'm doing, and I was explaining it to like a rock star. He had no idea about mocap, and he sends me a video of Benedict Cumberbatch doing, I don't know, The Lion King or something like that. And he's crawling on the ground, like, going crazy. And I'm like, oh, he's way better at this than me, right? I was like, I'd never seen it before. And then I ran it. I told somebody that story who works in the digital world, and they were like, they couldn't use any of that because he kept covering all this stuff. And I was like, okay, I feel a little bit.
You have to use so much imagination, though, as you said, because you're in the performance capture volume, and then Hideo and his team are adding so much of the graphics and the look and feel of it. When you finally saw the completed game, Norman, was it what you expected, or was it different?
It was more than I expected. I knew it would be mind-blowing for sure. When I finally saw even the trailers, and the trailers were released to the public so I could share the trailers, I showed everybody I know. I was blown away by it. It also music people that I know who even dabble in that type of musical score and create atmosphere for films and so forth. Everybody was blown away. They continue to be blown away. It's such another level of art and storytelling that I hadn't known before this. So, it's the cookie jar is off the lid now for me. I can't. I can only imagine sort of how far this can go. That's I'm hiding behind Hideo like a linebacker.
Well, but when it came out, 2019, 3 years ago, I'm sure ever since, you must have a lot of people that come up to you, or when you meet with fans or hear from people about what that game means to them. What does it mean to you in retrospect, 3 years later?
Most of the people just come to me and say, oh my God, what's he like? Talking about him. That's the first thing they say. But 3 years later, still, it's mind blowing to me. But people ask me questions like, "How do you do this? How did that happen? What did you have to do?" And I kind of explain up to a certain point, and then I go, "I don't know." Then they do that. But a lot of people, the most common question I get is what's Hideo like? That's the most common thing. And
what do you say?
How does he do it? They ask me how he directs you. How does he explain this to you? And I say, the thing with Hideo is like I almost feel like, we have a certain type of relationship that's on set, but also offset. I feel like he really takes care of his actors. There's some directors that don't, and the really good ones do. And you feel very safe sort of journeying into the unknown with him, because you know he's got your best interest at heart. He loves what he's doing. He appreciates that you're there working with him. It's a very comfortable, safe working environment. You know, that's the most common question I get is, how does he explain this to you? How does he work? What does he say? What does he do? You know.
まあ PCAP って特に
So performance capture takes place in a room with nothing. You're not on location. It's basically like a green screen. It takes like 3 years too. There needs to be trust between myself and the actors in order to see it through, because it can get pretty tough. So in the process of casting, the important things to keep in mind are the actors' performances and abilities, but also whether or not we can have a trusting relationship.
And you guys clearly have a good trust, so much that you're back in DS2, it looks like, based on the teaser, which is great to see that Sam has returned. So I know you're just starting production on that now with Hideo and the team, Norman, and you're also working on, you have a new spin-off series of Walking Dead you're working on too, right?
Yeah, I'm in here. I've been in France for about 4 months. We have 2 weeks worth of shooting in the can. Yeah, I'm doing that, and then doing Jeff Nichols, the bike rider, in Ohio at the same time. So I'm kind of bouncing back and forth.
Wow, that's a ton of projects, and obviously, you know, DS2, the PCAP, and you know, just like the first game, I'm sure you'll be shooting in kind of, you know, segments as Hideo develops the story and the script and whatnot. But I was happy to see Sam in the teaser, so Sam is back. I don't know how much more we can say than that, but any sense, Hideo? We saw Sam in the teaser. Can you tell us anything about Sam in DS2?
今のところあんまり言えないですけど、
I can't say much yet.
I tried, guys. I tried.
まあみんな
I believe a lot of people like Sam, and so I'm hoping those people will return to play DS2. And in order to appeal to those who didn't play the first one, I've made the game nostalgic, but also new. I can't say any more than that right now.
That's enough, but obviously you're working on it now. We saw Sam maybe looks a little bit older, but we'll see. Who knows what's going on in the world of DS2, so we'll have to wait and see. But Norman, when your collaboration with Hideo this time around, is it going to be any different? I mean, you've obviously gone through this once, so you're probably even more comfortable with sort of the process and what he's doing, but what's it been like for you so far?
It's been great. It is true. The process was new to me, and I was learning how to do it as we were making it. I feel way more confident going into the second one than I did in the first one, just on what I've learned I can do and can't do. There's that element of wonder when you're, I used to play games like Defender, you know what I mean? And they're so not even close to this level of gaming. But, as far as like the storyline, I understand more now. I understand the other characters, where they're coming from and how they interact with Sam. So I'm excited. I'm excited to push it a little bit further on my end as well and give him a little bit more of what he wants. And I'm excited to see anything that he does. So I couldn't be more excited and honored to be working with him.
まあ続編なので、まあ2回目なんですね、ノーマンと。
This is a sequel, so it's my second time working with Norman. And the technology has really improved over the last 3 years. Things that were impossible before are now possible. So we have been really challenging ourselves. It's not just a regular sequel in that sense.
And you guys, you probably haven't seen each other in person in a while, because I know Hideo's had to direct a lot remotely due to the pandemic and whatnot.
そうなんです、リモートなんですよ。
Yeah, we have been working remotely because of COVID.
I don't know if you, I remember TGA back in 2019, you guys were all together. It was last time I saw you, Hideo, and you, Norman, but it seems like you guys have been apart. So a lot of your work so far, Norman, I guess, has been remote, right? With talking to Hideo and being remote, right?
会ってないですね。
Yeah, we haven't seen each other.
It's pretty wild because there's like these life-size iPads in the room. and you're like, I'm trying to explain. They're like, I'm like, oh, he was in Japan while I was in California. Like, how does he do it? And I'm like, well, there's these life-size iPads around the room. He's like, beep, he's on this one, and then beep, he's over there on that one. It's like,
Okay.
it's crazy. It's like, I don't know. It's some sort of like, I don't know. It's
it's that special.
僕説明します。
Okay, let me explain. Sony has this new technology system called the Mado. It means window in Japanese. So just like Norman said, it looks like an enormous iPad. So imagine that you have 2 of these enormous iPads at Kojima Productions, and there are also 2 at the PCAP set. The visuals and the sound are interactive. You're connected in real time to the other side. The other side of the Mado could be like New York or something. It feels like an illusion almost. Like the person on the screen is right there.
Wow. Yeah, because I see you sometimes tweet the photos of you kind of sitting in the director's chair with the big screen. So that's, you'll be sitting at the office at KJP in Tokyo, and then Norman, you're on set, and then Hideo is sort of directing you remotely, but it feels like he's in the room.
そうですね。はい
Yes, exactly.
there's several giant.
Wow.
He's
all
all around me. You know, it's
まあ、12月からはもう現地に
But starting in December and here on out, I'll be going to the set for the performance captures.
Oh, great. But yeah, still, I mean, that was what's tough in the pandemic, and the fact that you have to make this, and I mean, it's, I'm sure, affected production for you for Walking Dead and the new series, Norman. But I know you got the Hollywood Walk of Fame star, by the way. Congratulations this year. That was amazing.
おめでとう
Congratulations.
Thank you. I didn't see that one coming. Pretty wild. Yeah, thank you. It was a good day. It was. I'm right next to Mr. Rogers. I'm right next to Dr. Seuss. I'm next to George Romero. It's pretty wild. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I'm sure you probably get a TV icon, and I know they have different icons. I'm like, you should get a video game one now too, because you're a star of many mediums now.
ビデオゲームの人はまだないんでしょうあれ
No one from video games has won that, right?
No, I don't think so. Not yet. But that's the next step, right? Because it's the future of all this. Well, we can't wait to hear what or see what you're doing with Hideo. I know it'll be a little while till we probably see more, but it's exciting that you're going to spend, I know, a lot of time next year doing PCAP. And tell us a bit more about you have the spinoff that you're filming now. You said Daryl Dixon, so that's going to be coming next year too.
I think it comes next year. Yeah, it's pretty epic. It's completely different in style and tone and sound and the look. All of it's completely different. So we'll be shooting here for at least a year. But we're shooting in the Louvre. We're shooting in
Wow.
catacombs. We're gonna mess this place up. So, but it's a big show here. I didn't realize how big it was in France, but it's a big one.
And then a little DS2 in between it. And Hideo, are you excited about the spinoff? Because I know you're a big fan of the series, and obviously Daryl and Norman and as a character, right?
はいはい
Yeah. Walking Dead went on for 10 years, and I think it influenced dramas not just in the US, but all over the world. After The Walking Dead, I think there was a lot of change. And Norman plays Daryl, a character that doesn't exist in the original story. And in the end, he became the main character. I think everyone is eager to see the spin-off. I'm a fan of The Walking Dead, but also as a Norman Reedus fan, I can't miss this. I'm really looking forward to it.
Me too. So we'll get lots more Norman, Daryl Dixon, DS2, and I'm sure many other things as well. And you said you're doing a project in Ohio, you said too, Norman?
Yeah, Jeff Nichols is directing a film called The Bike Riders. Austin Butler's in it, Tom Hardy's in it, like a lot of Michael Shannon, a lot of good actors are in it.
Cool.
It's based off of Danny Lyon's photography book called The Bike Riders. And I play a character named Funny Sonny.
ちょっと怪我しないでね
Make sure you don't get injured, okay, Norman?
It's funny because my first scene on that, before I even met the cast, really, was riding a 1950s suicide shift motorcycle down a wet hill across a field full of potholes. And then I get off and I talk to maybe 300 extras staring at me and then the main cast. And I'm like, what? So if I didn't get hurt in that first scene, I think I'm golden.
Love it. Well, sounds like you're busy on many things, but we're so glad you're back for DS2. And I'm sure we will find out more in due time when Hideo lets us understand more about what's going on with Sam.
It's going to be great. I know it'll be great.
Thanks so much, Norman.
Thank you.
ノーマンありがとうございます。
Thanks, Norman.
ブレインストラクチャー、早くもエンディングのお時間です。
It is now time to wrap up the episode.
Well, it was such a great episode. It was nice to have Norman on, and we tried to get a little more information out of him about what's going on in DS2. I wasn't very successful. Hideo is keeping his cards close to his vest, but I'm very excited about the collaboration, and clearly the two of them have an incredible relationship with each other. That's it for this episode of Brain Structure. We're looking to hear from our listeners too. If you have a message for Mr. Kojima, you have thoughts on the program, or if you have ideas for themes or guests for future episodes, please send them our way. The link to the message form can be found in the episode description.
はい、そうですね。
Yes, so we can't talk too much about DS2 today. I'm sorry. Please look forward to next week's episode of Hideo Kojima Presents Brain Structure.
さようなら。
Hideo Kojima Presents Brain Structure is a production by Spotify Studios in association with Kojima Productions and Fam Inc. TGA, the Jeff Sanser MC, Jeff Keighley. Narrator, Owen Maki. Music, Silent Poets. Visual design, Mechikuro. Producer, Hiro Furuki. Director, Kohei Takizawa. Executive producer at Spotify, Asami Sekine. Special thanks to Kojima Productions, Ayako Terashima, Masafumi Chiba, Miki Suda, and Aki Saito. Hosted by Hideo Kojima.
Since the announcement of Death Stranding 2, the excitement just doesn't stop. It was great to hear from Sam Bridges himself, Mr. Norman Reedus. We got to discover many stories from behind the scenes of Death Stranding and learn of the deep, trusting relationship Hideo Kojima and Norman have together. Speaking of which, I should reach out to some of my long-lost friends in Germany. But I don't have their numbers. What should I do? Anyway, on the next episode, we hope to bring you Brain Structure's first ever video podcast. Fingers crossed. It's a video, so you should see Hideo Kojima in action. I just can't wait.